Maya Johnson looked at the big clock on the restaurant wall. It was almost 6 in the evening. Soon the dinner crowd would start coming in. She tied her black apron around her waist and checked her reflection in the small mirror by the kitchen. Tartar. Her uniform was clean and pressed. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked professional, just like the restaurant wanted. Le Bernardin was not like other places Maya had worked before. This restaurant was fancy. Very fancy. The tables had white cloth covers and real flowers in glass vases. The chairs were made of dark wood and leather. Crystal glasses caught the light from the expensive chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Everything in this place cost more money than Maya made in a month. But Maya loved working here for one special reason. In the corner of the main dining room stood the most beautiful piano she had ever seen. It was a grand piano, black and shiny like a mirror. The lid was always closed and no one was allowed to touch it. The manager, Mr. Peterson, said it was only for very special events. Maybe once or twice a month, a professional piano player would come to perform for the wealthy customers. Maya had been working at Le Bernardin for 3 years now. She was 28 years old and needed this job badly. The tips were good because the customers had lots of money. But every day when she walked past that piano, her heart would beat a little faster. Her fingers would move slightly, as if they were playing invisible keys in the air. The truth was, Maya knew how to play piano. She knew how to play very well. But nobody at the restaurant knew this secret. How could they? She was just a waitress. People like her were not supposed to know about classical music or expensive pianos. When Maya was a little girl, her grandmother had worked as a house cleaner for rich families. Grandma Rose would take Maya with her sometimes during school holidays. One of the families had a piano in their living room. The lady of the house noticed that little Maya would stare at it with big, curious eyes. "Would you like to learn how to play?" the kind lady had asked. Maya nodded eagerly. The lady offered to teach Maya in exchange for some extra cleaning work from Grandma Rose. This was how Maya learned her first piano lessons. She learned quickly. Her small fingers moved across the keys like they belonged there. The lady was amazed at how fast Maya could learn new songs. Grandma Rose was proud but worried. Piano lessons cost money. Real lessons with a proper teacher cost lots of money that they did not have. But she loved Maya more than anything in the world. So Grandma Rose worked extra jobs. She cleaned more houses. She worked late into the night and early in the morning. Also, Maya could have piano lessons once a week. Maya learned to read music notes. She learned about composers like Mozart and Beethoven. She practiced on an old keyboard that Grandma Rose bought from a thrift store. The keys stuck sometimes and it did not sound like a real piano. But Maya practiced every day after school. She practiced until her fingers hurt. When Maya finished high school, she dreamed of going to music school. She wanted to become a professional piano player. But music school cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Even with her grandmother working so hard, they could not afford it. So Maya got a job as a waitress. She told herself it was just for a little while, just until she saved enough money for school. But years passed. Grandma Rose got sick and could not work anymore. Maya had to pay for medicine and doctor visits. The dream of music school seemed further and further away, but Maya never stopped playing piano. She found ways to practice. Sometimes she would go to the local church when it was empty. The pastor let her use the old piano in the basement. She also discovered that the community college had practice rooms with pianos. Late at night, when the security guard was not looking, Maya would sneak in and play. Last year, something wonderful happened. Maya found out that the community college offered night classes for adults. They had a music program. It was not as good as a real music school, but it was something. Maya could take classes after her restaurant shifts ended. It was hard work. Very hard work. She would serve dinner until 10 at night, then drive to school for class until midnight. She would get home at 1 in the morning, sleep for 5 hours, then get up and do it all again. But Maya loved it. In her music theory class, she learned about complicated pieces by famous composers. She learned about Chopin, a composer who wrote beautiful, difficult music for piano. Her teacher, Professor Williams, was impressed with Maya's natural talent and dedication. You have a gift, Professor Williams told her one evening after class. Your playing has soul. That cannot be taught. Maya felt proud, but also sad. She wondered what her life might have been like if she had been born into a rich family. Maybe she would be performing in concert halls instead of carrying plates of expensive food to people who would never notice her. At work, Maya tried to keep her two worlds separate. During the day, she was just Maya the waitress. She smiled at customers, took their orders and brought them their food. She listened to them complain about their problems with money and business, problems that seemed small compared to her own struggles. But sometimes, when she walked past the beautiful piano, she could not help herself. She would hum quietly. Classical melodies would float through her mind. Her fingers would tap against her leg, playing the rhythm of songs she had learned in secret. The other waitresses thought Maya was strange. They did not understand why she would hum classical music instead of popular songs. They did not know that when Maya looked at that piano, she saw possibility. She saw beauty. She saw everything she dreamed of becoming. Maya never imagined that one day that piano would change her life forever. She never imagined that her secret would be discovered in the most unexpected way. She just knew that music lived inside her heart, and nothing could take that away. As 6 o'clock arrived and the first dinner customers walked through the door, Maya straightened her shoulders and got ready for another evening of work. She had no idea that tonight would be different from all the others. Tonight would be the night that everything changed. The dinner service started like any other evening. Maya filled water glasses and took orders from well-dressed customers. The restaurant was busy but not too crowded. Everything was normal and peaceful. Then Richard Blackwood walked through the front door. Maya had never seen him before, but she knew right away that he was different from the other customers. He was a big man with silver hair and an expensive suit. His shoes were shiny and looked like they cost more than Maya made in a week. He wore a thick gold watch and a ring with a large diamond, but it was not his clothes or jewelry that made Maya notice him. It was the way he acted. Richard Blackwood walked into Le Bernardin like he owned the place. He looked around the restaurant with cold eyes, as if everything he saw was not good enough for him. Behind Richard came 4 other men in expensive suits. They all looked important and rich. They talked loudly about money and business deals as they followed Richard to a large table in the center of the dining room. Maya watched from across the room as the hostess seated them at the best table. It was right next to the piano. Maya felt a little uncomfortable. Something about these men made her nervous. "Maya," called Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, "please take care of table 12. Those are very important customers." Maya nodded and walked over to the table with menus and water glasses. As she got closer, she could hear what the men were talking about. 300 families, Richard was saying with a laugh. All of them out on the street by next month, but the profit margin on this project will be incredible. One of the other men raised his glass. "To Richard Blackwood," he said, "the man who can turn any neighborhood into gold." They all laughed and drank their expensive wine. Maya felt sick to her stomach. Were they talking about making families homeless? She tried to focus on her job and not listen to their conversation. "Good evening, gentlemen," Maya said politely. "Welcome to Le Bernardin. Can I start you with some appetizers tonight?" Richard looked up at her with sharp eyes. He did not smile. "We want the most expensive bottle of wine you have," he said, "and bring us 5 of your best steaks. Money is no problem tonight. We are celebrating." Maya wrote down their order. "Certainly, sir. I will have that right out for you." As she turned to leave, Richard called her back. "Wait," he said. His voice was not kind. "What is your name?" "Maya, sir." "Maya," Richard repeated, like he was testing how the name sounded. "Have you worked here long, Maya?" 3 years, sir." Richard smiled, but it was not a nice smile. 3 years. "And I bet you have never eaten anything from this menu, have you, Maya? Too expensive for someone like you." Maya felt her face get hot with embarrassment. The other men at the table chuckled quietly. She wanted to say something back, but she needed this job. "I will get your wine right away, sir," she said instead. In the kitchen, Maya told the chef about the order. Her hands were shaking a little bit. She did not like the way Richard had looked at her or spoken to her. It made her feel small and unimportant. "Who is that man?" Maya asked Carlos, another waiter who had worked at the restaurant longer than anyone. Carlos frowned. "Richard Blackwood," he said quietly. "He owns half the buildings downtown. Very rich, very powerful, but not a nice man. He treats working people like dirt under his shoes." Maya nodded. She had met people like Richard before. Rich people who thought their money made them better than everyone else. People who looked at her and saw only a waitress, nothing more. When Maya brought the wine to table 12, the men were talking even louder than before. They had already finished one bottle and were getting drunk. Richard was telling a story about buying an old apartment building. The families living there had been renting for 20 years, Richard said with a mean laugh. They thought they were safe. But I bought the building and raised the rent so high they could not afford it anymore. Now I can charge rich people 3 times as much. The other men laughed and congratulated Richard on his cleverness. Maya felt angry as she poured their wine. These men were talking about destroying people's lives like it was a game. As the evening went on, Richard and his friends got louder and more drunk. They made rude comments about the other customers. They complained that their food was not cooked perfectly. They demanded that Maya bring them more and more wine. Each time Maya came to their table, Richard would make some comment about her. He would ask if she had ever been inside a nice restaurant as a customer. He would wonder out loud if she had ever owned anything expensive. His friends would laugh, and Maya would feel smaller and smaller. The worst part was that other customers were starting to notice. People at nearby tables looked uncomfortable when Richard spoke loudly and rudely, but no one said anything. Richard Blackwood was too rich and powerful. People were afraid of him. Around 9 o'clock, something happened that changed everything. Maya was clearing dishes from a table near the piano when she started humming quietly to herself. It was a song by Chopin that she had been practicing in her night class. The melody was beautiful and sad, and it helped Maya feel better after dealing with Richard all evening. Maya did not realize that she was humming loud enough for anyone to hear. But Richard heard it. His sharp ears picked up the classical melody and he turned around to stare at Maya. "Well, well, well," Richard said in a loud voice that carried across the restaurant. "Listen to that, gentlemen. Our little waitress knows classical music." Maya froze. She had not meant for anyone to hear her humming. Now Richard was staring at her with those cold, calculating eyes. "Come here, Maya," Richard called out. "I want to ask you something." Maya walked slowly to table 12. Her heart was beating fast. She had a bad feeling about whatever Richard wanted to ask. "That song you were humming," Richard said. "Where did you learn it?" Maya did not want to answer, but she had to. I heard it somewhere, sir." "You heard it somewhere?" Richard repeated, mocking her. "How interesting. And tell me, Maya, have you ever played piano?" Maya's mouth felt dry. She did not know what to say. If she lied, Richard might find out somehow. But if she told the truth, she was afraid of what he might do with that information. "A little bit, sir," Maya said quietly. Richard's smile got bigger and meaner. "A little bit," he said to his friends. "Did you hear that? Our waitress plays piano a little bit." The men at the table started laughing. Maya felt her face burning with shame and anger. Richard stood up from his chair. He was tall and intimidating. "You know what, gentlemen?" he said loudly. "I think we need some entertainment tonight. Maya here is going to play piano for us." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, I cannot do that. The piano is not for staff to use." Richard laughed. Coldly, "Money talks, Maya. I will make sure the management does not mind." He pulled out his phone and called Mr. Peterson over to their table. Maya watched in horror as Richard whispered something to her manager and slipped him what looked like several $100 bills. Mr. Peterson's eyes got wide and he nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," Mr. Peterson said. "Maya can use the piano if you wish." Richard turned back to Maya with a triumphant smile. There you go, Maya. No more excuses. Time to show us what a waitress knows about piano playing. Maya looked around the restaurant. Everyone was watching now. She felt trapped, like a mouse caught by a cat. Richard Blackwood had set a trap for her, and she had walked right into it. The beautiful piano that Maya had admired for 3 years suddenly looked terrifying. In a few minutes, she would have to sit at that bench and play in front of all these people. Richard expected her to fail and embarrass herself. He wanted to humiliate her for his own entertainment. Maya's hands were shaking as she untied her apron. She had no choice now. She would have to play, and whatever happened next would change everything. Maya stood frozen next to table 12, her apron clutched in her trembling hands. The entire restaurant had fallen quiet. Everyone was looking at her now. She could feel dozens of eyes watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Richard Blackwood was enjoying every second of Maya's discomfort. He took a long sip of his expensive wine and smiled like a predator who had cornered its prey. His business friends were grinning too, already anticipating the show that Richard had arranged for their entertainment. "What is wrong, Maya?" Richard asked in a loud, mocking voice. "I thought you said you could play piano. Do not tell me you were lying to us." Maya's throat felt dry. She looked around desperately for help, but Mr. Peterson had disappeared back into his office after taking Richard's money. The other waiters were pretending to be busy with their tables, afraid to get involved. Maya was completely alone. I do not think this is a good idea, sir," Maya managed to say. Her voice sounded small and weak even to her own ears. Richard laughed coldly. "Not a good idea? But Maya, you have been staring at that piano every single day for 3 years. Carlos told me all about it. He said you are always humming and looking at it like you want to touch it." Maya felt betrayed. Carlos had been talking about her to this terrible man. She glanced over at Carlos, but he was looking down at the floor, ashamed. "Come on, Maya," Richard continued. "This is your big chance, your moment to shine. Are you not excited?" One of Richard's friends, a thin man with a cruel smile, joined in. "Maybe she is scared," he said. "Maybe she knows she cannot actually play anything." "That must be it," said another friend. "She probably just pretends to know about music to sound important." Maya felt anger building in her chest, mixing with her fear and embarrassment. These men were talking about her like she was not even there. They were making fun of her dreams and her struggles without knowing anything about her life. Richard stood up again and walked closer to Maya. He was so tall that she had to look up to see his face. "I will make you a deal, Maya," he said. "If you play something nice for us, I will give you a tip of $1,000. Cash money right now." Maya's eyes widened. $1,000 was more money than she made in a month of tips. It could pay for her next semester of night classes. It could help with her grandmother's medical bills. But Richard was not finished. "Of course," he said with that same cruel smile, "if you cannot play anything good, then you have to admit in front of everyone that you are lying. You have to say that waitresses like you should not pretend to know about fine music and culture." The trap was complete now. Richard had made sure that Maya could not walk away. If she refused to play, people would think she was scared and fake. If she played poorly, he would humiliate her in front of the entire restaurant. Either way, Richard would win. Maya looked at the piano again. It sat there in the corner like a beautiful, terrifying mountain that she had to climb. She had dreamed so many times of playing that instrument, but never like this. Never as entertainment for cruel, drunk, rich men who wanted to watch her fail. "Clock is ticking, Maya," Richard said. "What will it be? Are you going to play for us, or are you going to admit that you are just a simple waitress with big dreams and no talent?" Maya closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she could hear her grandmother's voice from many years ago. Grandma Rose had been teaching Maya how to braid her hair, and Maya was getting frustrated because she could not do it perfectly. "Baby girl," Grandma Rose had said, "life is going to test you many times. People are going to try to make you feel small and unworthy. But you remember this: Your worth does not come from what other people think of you. Your worth comes from what you know is true in your own heart. Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at Richard Blackwood. "I will play for you," she said. Richard clapped his hands together once, a sharp sound that made several people jump. "Excellent," he said. "This should be very entertaining." As Maya walked slowly toward the piano, she could hear Richard talking to his friends behind her. "This is going to be hilarious," he was saying. "She will probably play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or something a child would learn. These people always think they are more talented than they actually are." Maya reached the piano bench and stopped. The beautiful black piano loomed in front of her like a challenge. She had played many pianos before, but never one this expensive or this perfect. Never in front of so many people. Never when so much was at stake. She could hear whispers from the other tables around the restaurant. Some people sounded excited, curious to see what would happen. Others sounded uncomfortable, like they knew this was wrong but did not know how to stop it. Maya sat down on the bench and slowly lifted the piano lid. The keys were perfect ivory and black, clean and shining, under the restaurant's soft lights. She placed her hands gently on the keys, not pressing them yet, just feeling their smooth surface. "Any time now, Maya," Richard called out impatiently. "We do not have all night." Maya's hands were shaking slightly. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves. She thought about all those nights practicing on the old keyboard in her tiny apartment. She thought about sneaking into the community college to use their practice rooms. She thought about Professor Williams telling her that she had a gift. But mostly she thought about her grandmother. Grandma Rose had worked so hard to give Maya piano lessons when she was young. She had believed in Maya's talent even when no one else did. Even when they had no money and no hope, Grandma Rose had found a way to keep Maya's musical dreams alive. Maya knew that her grandmother would want her to play now, not for Richard Blackwood or his cruel friends, but for herself, for all the years of practice and dedication, for all the sacrifices that had been made so she could have this skill. "I am waiting," Richard said loudly. Some of his friends started laughing again. Maya positioned her fingers over the keys. She had to decide what to play. She could choose something simple and safe, something that would not give Richard more ammunition to mock her. Or she could play something that showed her true ability, something that came from her heart and her years of training. The decision was easier than she expected. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. She was going to play the piece that meant the most to her, the one she had been practicing for months in her night class, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. Most professional pianists found it challenging. It required not just technical skill but deep emotional understanding. It was definitely not something a simple waitress was supposed to know how to play. Maya took one final deep breath. Around her, the restaurant was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to listen. Everyone was waiting to see if the black waitress who served their food could actually make music. Maya pressed her fingers down on the keys and began to play. The first notes of the Chopin Ballade floated through the air like magic. Maya's nervousness began to melt away as muscle memory took over. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, exactly how much pressure to apply to each key, but something unexpected was happening. As Maya played, she felt something shift in the restaurant around her. The quality of the silence changed. People were not just waiting to see her fail anymore. They were actually listening to the music, and the music was beautiful. Maya's hands trembled as she placed them on the piano keys. The smooth ivory felt cool under her fingertips. She had touched these keys in her dreams so many times, but now that the moment was real, everything felt different. Harder. More frightening. She could feel Richard Blackwood's eyes burning into her back. She could sense his cruel anticipation, his certainty that she would fail and embarrass herself. Behind her, she heard one of his friends whisper, "This is going to be painful to watch." The entire restaurant was holding its breath. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. Forks hung in the air halfway to mouths. Even the soft background music that usually played through the restaurant's speakers had been turned off. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Maya stared down at the keys. For a moment, her mind went completely blank. She could not remember how to read music. She could not remember where to place her fingers. Years of training seemed to disappear, leaving her feeling lost and confused. "Any time now," Richard called out in a sing-song voice. "We are all very excited to hear what our talented waitress can do." His words cut through Maya like a knife, but they also sparked something inside her. Anger. Determination. She thought about all the times in her life when people had underestimated her, all the times when people had looked at her and seen only what they expected to see. A poor black girl who should be grateful for whatever scraps life threw her way. Maya closed her eyes and let herself remember. She remembered being 7 years old, sitting at Mrs. Henderson's piano for her first lesson. Mrs. Henderson had been the kind lady whose house Grandma Rose cleaned. She had been patient and encouraging, telling Maya that her small fingers were perfect for piano playing. She remembered Grandma Rose working late into the night, her hands red and sore from scrubbing other people's floors, just so Maya could have those weekly lessons. "Music is a gift from God," Grandma Rose would say. "If He gave you this gift, then you must use it. Do not let anyone tell you that you are not good enough." She remembered her high school music teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, who had pulled her aside after class one day. "Maya," he had said, "you have something special. I have been teaching music for 20 years and I have never heard a student play with so much feeling. Promise me you will not give up on this." But most of all, Maya remembered Professor Williams from her night classes. Just 2 weeks ago, after Maya had played a particularly difficult piece, Professor Williams had gotten tears in her eyes. "Maya," she had said, "when you play, you do not just make music. You tell stories, you share your heart. That is the difference between a good musician and a great one." Maya opened her eyes and looked down at the piano keys again. Suddenly, she knew exactly what she wanted to play. It would be Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece she had been working on for months. It was beautiful, complex, and emotional. It was also extremely difficult. Most professional pianists struggled with it. Maya knew that playing this piece was risky. If she made mistakes, Richard would have even more reason to mock her. But if she played it well, if she played it with all the skill and passion she possessed, maybe people would finally see her as more than just a waitress. She positioned her hands over the keys. Her fingers found their starting positions automatically, muscle memory guiding them to the right places. She took a slow, deep breath, the way Professor Williams had taught her. "Remember," she could hear Professor Williams saying in her mind, "music is not about perfection. It is about communication. You are not just playing notes on a page. You are sharing a piece of your soul with everyone who listens." Maya thought about her grandmother sleeping peacefully at home in her small bed. Grandma Rose was 82 years old now and her health was not good. But every week she still asked Maya about her music lessons. "How is your playing coming along, baby girl?" she would ask. "Are you still working toward your dream?" Maya thought about all the nights she had practiced on that old broken keyboard, the one with keys that stuck and made strange buzzing sounds. She thought about sneaking into the community college to use their practice rooms, always afraid that someone would discover her and throw her out. She thought about her classmates in night school, other adults who were chasing dreams that the world told them were impossible. There was James, a construction worker who wanted to become a teacher. There was Sarah, a single mother who was studying to be a nurse. There was David, a janitor who dreamed of starting his own business. All of them were working multiple jobs, going to school at night, sacrificing sleep and comfort for the chance at something better. Maya played for all of them too. For everyone who had ever been told they were not smart enough, not talented enough, not worthy enough to reach for their dreams. Maya's breathing became steady and calm. The trembling in her hands stopped. She felt a familiar warmth spreading through her chest, the feeling she always got when she was about to play music that mattered to her. She pressed her foot gently on the piano's sustain pedal, just the way she had been taught. The pedal would allow the notes to ring longer, creating the rich, flowing sound that made Chopin's music so beautiful. Around her, the restaurant seemed to fade away. Richard Blackwood and his cruel friends became less important. The watching customers became less frightening. Even her own nervousness began to disappear. There was only Maya, the piano, and the music that lived in her heart. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 floated into the air like butterflies, taking flight. They were soft at first, gentle and questioning, like someone whispering a secret. Maya's right hand carried the melody while her left hand provided a steady rhythmic foundation. As the music began, something magical happened. Maya felt herself transported to a different place. A place where she was not a waitress being humiliated by cruel, rich men. She was a musician, an artist, someone whose job was to create beauty and share it with the world. The notes flowed from her fingers like water from a spring. Each phrase of the music told a story, sometimes sad, sometimes hopeful, sometimes passionate. Maya had played this piece hundreds of times in practice, but tonight it felt new and alive. She could sense a change in the atmosphere around her. The mocking whispers from Richard's table had stopped. The uncomfortable shifting and coughing from other customers had quieted. People were not just listening anymore. They were being drawn into the music, carried along by its emotional current. Maya's fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence. The technical difficulties that had challenged her during practice sessions seemed to melt away. Her hands knew exactly where to go, exactly how to shape each phrase for maximum beauty and impact. As she played, Maya felt her grandmother's presence with her, as if Grandma Rose was standing right beside the piano, nodding with pride. She felt Professor Williams there too, and Mrs. Henderson, and Mr. Rodriguez, and all the other people who had believed in her musical gift over the years. The music swelled and grew more complex. Maya's hands moved across the keyboard like birds in flight, finding every note with precision and grace. She was not just playing Chopin's composition, she was making it her own, adding her own interpretation, her own emotions, her own life experiences to every phrase. And slowly Maya began to realize that something extraordinary was happening in Le Bernardin restaurant, something that would change everything. As Maya's fingers moved across the piano keys, something beautiful began to happen. The music that flowed from the instrument was not just good, it was extraordinary. The notes seemed to fill every corner of the restaurant with pure, liquid emotion. Maya felt herself becoming one with the music. All her nervousness disappeared. All her fear melted away. There was only the piano, the melody, and the story that Chopin had written more than 100 years ago, but that Maya was now telling in her own voice. The Ballade No. 1 in G minor was not an easy piece to play. It required both technical skill and deep emotional understanding. The music moved between different moods, sometimes gentle and questioning, sometimes powerful and dramatic, sometimes sad and longing. Maya's hands moved with perfect grace and control. When the music called for softness, her touch was as light as feathers on the keys. When it demanded power, her fingers struck with confident strength. Every note was exactly where it should be, exactly when it should be there. But technical perfection was not what made Maya's performance special. It was the feeling she put into every phrase. As she played, Maya poured her entire life into the music. All her struggles, all her dreams, all her love for her grandmother, all her hope for the future. Everything became part of the melody. The restaurant around Maya had become completely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of people waiting for someone to fail, but the hushed quiet of people witnessing something remarkable. Conversations had stopped entirely. Even the kitchen staff had come to the doorway to listen. Maya could sense the change in the atmosphere, but she did not let it distract her. She was deep inside the music now, letting it carry her along like a river. Her eyes were closed, and she was seeing colors and shapes that matched the sounds flowing from the piano. At table 12, Richard Blackwood's cruel smile had completely disappeared. His mouth hung open slightly as he listened to the beautiful music coming from the woman he had expected to humiliate. The wine glass in his hand remained frozen halfway to his lips, forgotten. Richard's business friends were equally stunned. They had come expecting to laugh at a waitress making a fool of herself. Instead, they were hearing music that belonged in the world's greatest concert halls. Around the restaurant, other customers began to react. An elderly couple at a corner table had stopped eating entirely. The woman had tears in her eyes as she listened. Her husband reached across the table and took her hand, both of them lost in the beauty of Maya's playing. A young businessman who had been working on his laptop closed it and pushed it aside. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. For the first time in months, his mind was not focused on deals and deadlines. There was only the piano and the emotions it stirred in his heart. Two teenage girls who had been taking selfies with their fancy desserts put their phones away. They sat perfectly still, amazed by the skill and passion they were witnessing. One whispered to the other, "I have never heard anything so beautiful." As Maya continued to play, the music grew more complex and demanding. Her left hand played a steady bass line while her right hand soared through difficult runs and arpeggios. The melody twisted and turned, sometimes dancing lightly, sometimes surging with intense emotion. Maya's years of practice on that old broken keyboard in her apartment had prepared her for this moment. All those nights when she had practiced until her fingers ached, all those times when she had played the same difficult passages over and over until they were perfect, it was all worth it now. She moved into the middle section of the piece where Chopin had written some of his most beautiful and challenging music. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, playing runs that sparkled like diamonds and melodies that sang like human voices. Every note was clear and precise, every phrase shaped with artistic intelligence. Professor Williams had been right when she said that Maya had a gift. But it was more than just natural talent. Maya had worked harder than most people could imagine to develop her skills. She had sacrificed sleep, comfort, and social activities to become the musician she was tonight. As the music reached its emotional climax, Maya felt tears on her cheeks. She was not crying from sadness or fear anymore. These were tears of joy, of release, of finally being able to show the world who she really was inside. The piano sang under her hands like a living thing. The instrument, which had sat silent and unused for most of its life at Le Bernardin, seemed grateful to finally be played by someone who understood its voice. Every key responded perfectly to Maya's touch, creating sounds of incredible richness and depth. In the kitchen, Carlos the waiter stood with the cooks and dishwashers, all of them mesmerized by what they were hearing. Carlos felt ashamed now for telling Richard Blackwood about Maya's interest in the piano. He had not meant to cause trouble for her. He had no idea that she could play like this. Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, emerged from his office to see what was happening. When he heard Maya's playing, he stopped dead in his tracks. In all his years of managing Le Bernardin, he had never heard the piano played with such skill and emotion. The professional musicians they hired for special events were good, but none of them had ever created magic like this. Maya moved into the final section of the piece where Chopin had written music of incredible technical difficulty and emotional power. Her hands stretched across the keyboard, playing chords that required perfect finger control and passages that demanded lightning-fast precision. But Maya was not just showing off her technical skills. Every difficult run, every complex harmony, every dramatic crescendo served the emotional story that the music was telling. She was not playing to impress people with how fast her fingers could move. She was sharing her heart through sound. As the piece neared its end, Maya felt a sense of completion that she had never experienced before. This was what she had been born to do. This was why her grandmother had worked so hard to pay for piano lessons. This was why she had spent years practicing in secret, dreaming of moments like this. The final chords of the ballade rang out through the restaurant, rich and full and final. Maya held them with perfect timing, letting them fade naturally into silence. She kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, not wanting the connection between herself and the music to end. Then, slowly, Maya lifted her hands and opened her eyes. The silence that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not empty or awkward. It was full of amazement, full of respect, full of the lingering beauty of the music that had just ended. Maya looked out at the restaurant for the first time since she had begun playing. Every single person was staring at her, but they were not staring with mockery or pity. They were looking at her with awe. For several long seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The entire restaurant seemed frozen in a moment of pure appreciation for what they had just witnessed. Then, from a table near the back of the restaurant, someone began to clap. The first person to start clapping was an elderly gentleman sitting alone at a table in the back corner of the restaurant. He was a thin man with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been eating dinner quietly by himself when Maya began to play, but now he was on his feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The sound of his clapping broke the spell that had fallen over Le Bernardin. Suddenly, as if a dam had burst, the entire restaurant erupted in applause. It was not polite, restrained clapping like customers might give to background music. This was thunderous, emotional applause, the kind reserved for truly extraordinary performances. Maya sat on the piano bench, stunned by the reaction. She had expected Richard Blackwood and his friends to laugh at her. She had prepared herself for embarrassment and failure. She had never imagined that playing the piano could create this kind of response. People throughout the restaurant were standing up now, clapping with real appreciation. The elderly couple who had been holding hands during her performance were both crying openly as they applauded. The young businessman was shaking his head in amazement, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. Even the kitchen staff had come out from behind the serving counter. The cooks in their white uniforms, the dishwashers with their rubber gloves, the busboys with their cleaning towels, all of them were clapping enthusiastically for their co-worker who had just revealed herself to be so much more than anyone had imagined. Maya looked toward table 12, where Richard Blackwood sat with his business associates. Richard's face had gone completely pale. His mouth was still hanging open slightly, and his wine glass remained frozen in his hand, exactly where it had been when Maya first started playing. The cruel, mocking expression that had been on Richard's face all evening was completely gone. In its place was something Maya had never expected to see: shame. Richard Blackwood, the powerful real estate mogul who treated working people like dirt, looked ashamed of himself. His friends at the table seemed equally stunned. They had come to Le Bernardin expecting to celebrate their latest business deal by humiliating a waitress. Instead, they had witnessed a performance that belonged on the stages of the world's most prestigious concert halls. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Maya remained seated at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had dreamed of moments like this, but her dreams had always taken place in proper concert halls, not in the restaurant where she served food. As the clapping began to die down, the elderly gentleman from the back table started walking toward the piano. He moved slowly but purposefully, using a walking cane to support himself. Other customers watched curiously as he made his way across the restaurant. When he reached Maya, the old man smiled warmly. "My dear," he said in a gentle voice that carried a slight accent, "that was absolutely magnificent. I have not heard Chopin's first ballade played with such passion and skill in many, many years." Maya looked up at him with surprise. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. I was very nervous." The old man chuckled kindly. "Nervous? I would never have known. You played with the confidence and artistry of a seasoned professional." He paused and looked directly into Maya's eyes. "Tell me, where did you study? Music?" "I take night classes at the community college," Maya replied, still not quite believing that this conversation was really happening. The gentleman nodded thoughtfully. "And before that?" Maya hesitated. She was not used to talking about her background with strangers, especially not in front of a room full of people who were still listening to every word. "My grandmother paid for piano lessons when I was young," she said finally. "But I have been mostly self-taught since then." The old man's eyes widened with amazement. "Self-taught?" he repeated. "My dear girl, do you have any idea how remarkable that is? The piece you just played is considered one of the most challenging in the entire piano repertoire. Professional musicians spend years mastering it." By now, other customers were gathering around the piano, drawn by curiosity about the conversation. Maya felt uncomfortable being the center of so much attention, but the old gentleman's kindness gave her courage. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Maya Johnson, sir." The elderly man extended his hand for her to shake. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Maya Johnson. My name is James Morrison." A gasp went up from several people in the crowd around the piano. The name James Morrison clearly meant something to them, though Maya did not recognize it. "You do not know who I am, do you?" Mr. Morrison asked, with an amused smile. Maya shook her head apologetically. "I am sorry, sir. Should I?" "There is no reason you should," Mr. Morrison replied kindly. "But I spent 43 years as the principal conductor of the City Symphony Orchestra. I retired 5 years ago, but I still love to attend concerts and discover new musical talent." Now Maya was the one who gasped. The City Symphony Orchestra was one of the most respected musical organizations in the country. She had dreamed her whole life of someday playing with an orchestra like that. Mr. Morrison continued speaking, but his voice was now loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "In all my years in professional music," he said, "I have rarely encountered raw talent of this caliber. Maya, your playing tonight was not just technically excellent. It was deeply musical, emotionally mature, and artistically sophisticated." The crowd around the piano murmured with appreciation. Several people took out their phones and began recording as Mr. Morrison continued to speak. "The way you shaped each phrase, the way you balanced technical precision with emotional expression, the way you made that piano sing, these are the qualities we look for in world-class musicians." Maya felt dizzy. This could not be real. An hour ago, she had been serving dinner to rude customers. Now one of the most important music figures in the city was praising her playing in front of a room full of people. Other customers began approaching Maya to offer their own compliments. A well-dressed woman introduced herself as a music teacher and asked if Maya gave private lessons. A young man who worked for the local arts council asked if she would be interested in performing at upcoming events. Business cards and phone numbers were pressed into Maya's hands. People were taking her picture and asking permission to post videos of her performance on social media. In a matter of minutes, Maya had gone from being an invisible waitress to being the most talked-about person in the restaurant. But the most important transformation was happening at table 12. Richard Blackwood had finally set down his wine glass and was staring at Maya with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It was not cruelty or mockery or arrogance. It was something that looked almost like respect. As the crowd around Maya continued to grow, Richard stood up from his table. His business associates watched him nervously, unsure of what he planned to do next. Richard had built his reputation on being tough and ruthless. Admitting he had been wrong about something, especially in public, was not something he did easily. But something about Maya's performance had shaken Richard deeply. As he listened to her play, he had been forced to confront the ugly truth about his own behavior. He had tried to humiliate a young woman for his own entertainment, and instead she had shown him a beauty and dignity that made his cruelty look small and pathetic. Richard walked slowly toward the piano, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his shame. The crowd parted to let him through, curious about what the man who had started this whole situation would say now. When Richard reached Maya, he stopped and looked down at her for a long moment. The entire restaurant fell quiet again, waiting to see what would happen next. "Maya," Richard said finally, his voice much quieter and more humble than it had been all evening. "I owe you an apology." Maya looked up at him with surprise. This was the last thing she had expected from the arrogant man who had tormented her all night. "I was wrong," Richard continued, his words carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. "I was cruel and unfair to you. You have shown me something tonight that I will never forget." The transformation in Le Bernardin was complete. What had begun as an evening of cruelty and mockery had become something beautiful and redemptive. Maya's music had not only revealed her own hidden talents, it had also revealed the capacity for change that existed in even the hardest of hearts. Maya stared up at Richard Blackwood in complete shock. The arrogant man who had spent the entire evening trying to humiliate her was now standing before her with genuine regret in his eyes. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "I am truly sorry," Richard continued, his voice carrying a sincerity that seemed to surprise even him. What I did tonight was inexcusable. I tried to use you for entertainment, and instead you have shown me what real class and dignity look like. The entire restaurant remained silent as Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He removed not just a few bills but what looked like his entire collection of cash. "This is not payment for your performance," he said as he placed the money on top of the piano. "This is an apology, and it is not nearly enough to make up for how I treated you." Maya looked at the money in amazement. There had to be several $1,000s there, more money than she had ever seen at one time. But even more surprising than the money was the change in Richard's entire demeanor. The cruel, mocking man from earlier in the evening was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely humbled. James Morrison, the retired symphony conductor, watched this exchange with great interest. He had seen many things in his long career in music, but he had rarely witnessed such a complete transformation in a person. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "I believe your apology is sincere, but Maya's talent deserves more than just an apology." Richard nodded emphatically. "You are absolutely right," he said. "Maya, I want to help you in any way I can. What are your dreams? What do you need to pursue your music?" Maya felt overwhelmed. Everything was happening so fast. An hour ago, she had been afraid of losing her job. Now, the man who had tried to destroy her was offering to help her achieve her dreams. I am studying music at the community college," Maya said hesitantly. "I want to finish my degree and maybe someday play professionally, but it is expensive and I have to work to pay for my grandmother's medical care." Mr. Morrison stepped forward again. "Maya, I have a proposition for you. The City Symphony Orchestra has a program for promising young musicians. We provide scholarships, private lessons with our principal players, and performance opportunities. Based on what I heard tonight, I would like to recommend you for immediate acceptance into the program." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You would do that for me?" "My dear," Mr. Morrison said with a gentle smile, "talent like yours comes along perhaps once in a generation. It would be a crime not to nurture it properly." Other people in the crowd began offering their own support. The music teacher who had approached earlier pulled out her business card again. "I would love to give you free lessons to help prepare you for auditions," she said. The young man from the Arts Council stepped forward as well. "We have several upcoming concerts where we could feature you as a soloist. The pay is not much, but it would give you professional performance experience." Maya looked around at all the faces surrounding her. Faces that an hour ago had been complete strangers, but now looked at her with respect and admiration. She felt like she was living in a dream, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. From across the restaurant, a woman had been quietly observing the entire scene. She was elegantly dressed and had the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to being in charge of important situations. The woman approached the piano with purposeful steps. When she reached the group, she addressed Maya directly. "Excuse me," she said in a crisp, professional voice. "My name is Victoria Chen, and I am the artistic director for the Metropolitan Music Festival. I was having dinner here tonight when I heard your performance." Maya had heard of the Metropolitan Music Festival. It was one of the most prestigious musical events in the region, featuring world-class performers and attended by thousands of people. "I would like to invite you to perform at our festival this summer," Victoria continued. "We have an evening dedicated to emerging artists, and your performance tonight has convinced me that you belong on that stage." The crowd around the piano buzzed with excitement. To be invited to perform at the Metropolitan Music Festival was an honor that most professional musicians worked their entire careers to achieve. Maya felt like her legs might give out from under her. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," called out several voices from the crowd. Mr. Morrison placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Maya, opportunities like this are rare. I have seen many talented musicians over the years, but few who have the combination of technical skill and emotional depth that you demonstrated tonight. You must not let fear hold you back." Maya thought about her grandmother sleeping at home. Grandma Rose had always told her to be ready when opportunity knocked because it might not knock twice. Yes, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I would be honored to perform at the festival. The crowd erupted in applause again. People were taking pictures and videos, capturing this magical moment. Maya knew that by tomorrow, the story of the waitress who shocked everyone with her piano playing would be spreading throughout the city. Richard Blackwood, who had been quietly observing all these offers of help, stepped forward again. Maya, he said, I want to add something to these generous offers. I will personally pay for the best private piano instruction available. I will also establish a fund to cover your living expenses while you pursue your musical education, so you will not have to worry about working multiple jobs. Maya stared at Richard in complete amazement. Why would you do that for me? She asked. Richard was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because tonight you taught me something important about myself, he said finally. I have spent so many years looking down on people, thinking that money and power made me better than everyone else. But you showed me real excellence tonight, the kind that comes from talent, hard work, and dedication. I want to be part of helping you succeed, instead of being the kind of person who tries to tear others down. Mr. Morrison nodded approvingly. That is a very generous offer, Mr. Blackwood. Maya, with this kind of support, you could focus entirely on your musical development. You could work with the best teachers, enter the most prestigious competitions, and audition for professional orchestras. Maya felt tears streaming down her face now. These were not tears of sadness or fear, but tears of joy and gratitude. One evening, her entire life had changed. She was surrounded by people who believed in her talent and wanted to help her succeed. There is one more thing, Mr. Morrison said with a twinkle in his eye. Maya, would you be willing to give us one more song tonight? I think everyone here would love to hear you play again. The crowd immediately began encouraging Maya to play another piece. Even the restaurant staff, who had been watching from the edges of the dining room, started calling for an encore. Maya looked at the piano, then at all the expectant faces surrounding her. She felt different now than she had when she first sat down to play. Then she had been frightened and defensive, playing to prove that she deserved respect. Now she was playing from a place of joy and celebration. I would love to play one more song, Maya said, settling back onto the piano bench. This time she chose something different. Instead of the complex, challenging Chopin piece that had first amazed everyone, Maya decided to play something from her heart. She began the gentle, beautiful melody of Amazing Grace, the hymn that her grandmother had sung to her as a child. As the familiar melody filled the restaurant, Maya played with all the love and gratitude she felt in her heart. She played for her grandmother, who had sacrificed so much. She played for all the people who had believed in her over the years. She played for everyone in the restaurant who had shown her such kindness and support. But most of all, Maya played for herself, for the young girl who had dreamed of making music, and for the woman she was becoming, who was finally ready to share her gifts with the world. The transformation was complete. Maya Johnson was no longer just a waitress who happened to know how to play piano. She was a musician, an artist, someone whose talent had been recognized and celebrated. Her life would never be the same again. 6 months later, Maya Johnson stood backstage at the Grand Concert Hall wearing a beautiful black evening gown. Her hands were trembling slightly, but this time it was from excitement rather than fear. In just a few minutes, she would walk onto one of the most prestigious stages in the country to perform with the City Symphony Orchestra. The months since that transformative night at Le Bernardin had passed like a whirlwind. True to his word, Richard Blackwood had arranged for Maya to study with the finest piano teachers in the city, Professor Elena Vasquez, who had taught some of the world's most celebrated pianists, had taken Maya on as her personal student. You have raw talent that cannot be taught, Professor Vasquez had told Maya during their first lesson. My job is simply to help you refine it and present it to the world. The intensive training had been challenging but exhilarating. Maya had learned advanced techniques, studied new repertoire, and developed the stage presence necessary for professional performance. Most importantly, She had gained confidence in herself as a serious musician rather than someone who just happened to play piano well. Richard had also kept his promise about financial support. He had established a scholarship fund that not only covered Maya's education, but also provided for her grandmother's medical care. This meant that Maya could quit her job at Le Bernardin and focus entirely on her musical development. Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, had been sorry to lose Maya, but proud of her success. "We will always remember the night you played our piano," he had told her on her last day of work. It was the most magical evening in the history of this restaurant. James Morrison had become more than just Maya's supporter. He had become her mentor and friend. He attended her lessons, gave her advice about the music industry, and helped her prepare for auditions. Most importantly, he had kept his promise to recommend her for the symphony's Young Artists program. Maya's audition for the City Symphony had taken place 3 months after the night at Le Bernardin. She had performed the same Chopin piece that had first amazed everyone, along with a Mozart concerto and a contemporary work. The orchestra's music committee had been unanimous in their decision to invite her to perform as a featured soloist. The Key Metropolitan Music Festival performance had been Maya's first major public concert. Victoria Chen had given her a prime spot in the festival lineup, and Maya had performed for an audience of over 2,000 people. The local newspapers had written glowing reviews, calling her a rising star with exceptional talent and musical maturity. But tonight was different. Tonight was Maya's debut with a full professional orchestra, performing Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21 with the City Symphony. It was a dream she had held in her heart for years, never believing it could actually come true. As Maya waited in the wings, she thought about her grandmother. Grandma Rose was sitting in the front row of the concert hall, wearing her best dress and a huge smile. At 82 years old, Grandma Rose was proud beyond words to see her granddaughter living the dream they had both worked so hard to achieve. "Maya," called the stage manager, "it is time." Maya took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The concert hall erupted in applause as she appeared in the spotlight. She bowed gracefully to the audience, then took her place at the grand piano. As the orchestra began the opening of Mozart's concerto, Maya felt the same sense of peace and joy that had come over her that night at Le Bernardin. The months of intensive practice had prepared her perfectly for this moment. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, and her heart knew exactly what story to tell through the music. When it came time for her first solo entrance, Maya's playing soared over the orchestra with clarity and passion. The difficult passages that had once challenged her now flowed effortlessly. But more than technical perfection, Maya brought something special to the performance, the same emotional depth and authenticity that had first amazed everyone at the restaurant. In the audience, many familiar faces watched with pride. James Morrison sat with tears in his eyes, remembering the night he had first heard Maya play. Victoria Chen nodded with satisfaction, knowing her instinct to invite Maya to the festival had been correct. Most surprisingly, Richard Blackwood was there too. He had changed dramatically over the past 6 months. The experience of seeing Maya's talent and dignity had made him examine his own life and values. He had quietly begun donating money to music programs for underprivileged children and treating his employees with more respect and kindness. As Maya finished the final movement of the concerto, her hands dancing through the brilliant final cadenza, the entire concert hall seemed to hold its breath. The last notes rang out clearly and purely, and then silence fell for just a moment before the audience exploded in thunderous applause. Maya stood and bowed deeply to the audience, then turned to acknowledge the orchestra. The applause went on, and on, with people standing and shouting, "Bravo!" James Morrison was right. She had something special that could not be taught. After the concert, Maya was surrounded by well-wishers backstage. Fellow musicians congratulated her on her performance. Music critics asked for interviews. Representatives from recording companies inquired about her future plans. But the moment that meant the most to Maya was when her grandmother made her way backstage with the help of her walking cane. Grandma Rose's eyes were bright with tears of joy and pride. "Baby girl," Grandma Rose said, taking Maya's hands in her own. "I always knew you had music in your heart, but tonight you shared that music with the world, and the world is better for it." Maya hugged her grandmother tightly. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. "Thank you for making sacrifices so I could have piano lessons. Thank you for never letting me give up on my dreams." Later that evening, Maya received a phone call that would open the next chapter of her life. It was from the director of the National Young Artists Program, inviting her to audition for a full scholarship to study at one of the country's most prestigious music conservatories. But Maya had already decided what she wanted to do with her success. Yes, she would continue her own musical education and career, but she also wanted to give back to her community in the same way that so many people had helped her. The following week, Maya announced the establishment of the Rose Johnson Music Foundation, named after her grandmother. The foundation would provide piano lessons and scholarships for children from low-income families, ensuring that financial barriers would not prevent other young people from pursuing their musical dreams. Maya began teaching piano lessons at the community center in her old neighborhood. Every Saturday morning she worked with children who reminded her of herself at that age. Talented kids who needed someone to believe in them and give them a chance. One of her first students was a 7-year-old girl named Keisha, whose single mother worked 2 jobs to support her family. When Maya heard Keisha play for the first time, she saw the same spark of natural talent that she had possessed as a child. "You have a gift," Maya told Keisha after her first lesson. "If you work hard and practice every day, there is no limit to what you can achieve." Keisha smiled widely. "Will you teach me to play like you do, Miss Maya?" "I will teach you everything I know," Maya promised. "And someday, you might even play better than me." As Maya watched Keisha's small fingers find their way around the piano keys, she thought about the circle of music and mentorship that had brought her to this point. Her grandmother had sacrificed to give her lessons. Kind teachers had nurtured her talent. James Morrison had opened doors for her. Richard Blackwood had provided financial support. Professor Vasquez had refined her skills. Now it was Maya's turn to pass on that gift to the next generation. Maya Johnson had traveled an incredible journey from waitress to professional musician. But perhaps the most important part of her story was not her rise to fame, but her decision to use her success to lift up others. She had learned that true talent is not just about what you can do for yourself, but about what you can do to make the world more beautiful for everyone. Every time Maya sat down at a piano now, whether it was on a concert stage or in a community center classroom, she remembered that night at Le Bernardin. She remembered how music had transformed not just her own life, but the hearts of everyone who heard it. And she knew that as long as she continued to share her gift with honesty, passion, and love, the music would keep working its magic, one note at a time, one heart at a time, one dream at a time.